or does not say how high if the governor says please jump. That's been real clear to me. They are an independent, autonomous board who does what they believe is right for our schools. But, you know, I almost go back, Joe, to thinking that we perhaps are allowing federal programs to determine way too much what's going on in our schools. And I really think we need to rethink, Mr. Superintendent, how we're doing this. I just, when I taught, it was local performance standards. It was, I knew my kids best. I was held accountable for the student performance outcomes, and I was able to configure my day. And when you look at the literature, our best performing teachers do appreciate what you're talking about, and that is autonomy. But it has to be autonomy, and I've heard you state this before, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you can't have autonomy because you certainly need help. But I just throw that on the table. I think maybe we're being told way too much what to do and how to do it. And our teachers know how. We need to allow them to do that. So I ask that we relook at that. And I don't take away anything, Joe, from what you've been doing, because I know you've been working hard on this. But I just kind of wonder, you know, it's not, I'm not sure it's serving us right. Then it takes me to, Rob, I know that you've been doing a lot of work on an alignment initiative. I believe that was one of yours, about populations and where the schools are. And I've been talking, Tamuning is our third highest village people-wise. I know I said that the wrong way, but we're up there. And we don't have middle school. And so we went to, we go to Rios Middle, which was a great experience for us. I want to applaud Karina Paulino, who's in the audience right now. She ran a good school, and but I do know that it would be great if we had a village school. And I'm wondering if you would be able to give us an update about that whole alignment initiative. And while there has been some conversation about 437, which is actually Public Law 31-229, I've been asking where are the technical amendments that I've been told there are of, and I can't seem to get response. So maybe you can. Maybe you can ask the governor's office where the technical amendments are, because the legislature, as far as I know, hasn't gotten anything, and we can't move. But in there, at the recommendation of Madam Superintendent Talling at the time, we asked for $1 million to be spent on a CIP master plan so that you can make the smart decisions about where and how. But Rob, if you could tell us where that alignment initiative is, please.
Sure. Actually, the committee, which comprised of school principals from the elementary, middle, and high school levels, did get together prior to 2012, before January 2012, and put together a plan to address the immediate needs. And I know your dream is always to have that middle school in Tamuning, but that would require sacrificing another school. And at that point in time, the recommendation was to shift students out of Jose Rios over to Untalan, and students out of Untalan over to Benavente, where there is some space. The middle school, there is some space. In collaboration with the school principal, of course. Nobody said, well, he's got space, we'll just dump it over there. We asked before we put that into the plan. And then we actually looked at specific attendance areas of shifting. And I believe the main shift from Rios to Untalan was Mongmong Toto Mighty going to Untalan. And then from Untalan to Benavente was going to be the Liguan Terrace, basically across the street from Benavente. We also looked at the Upper Tumon students from Rios to go to Benavente as well, much better proximity-wise, and much less of a bus drive. So that recommendation has been put on the table for consideration as well. Again, before you make a shift of this magnitude, you're going to have to engage a number of stakeholders. I mean, you're not going to just wait till summer break and say, okay, we're going to shift everybody, and that's effective come school year 2012-2013. People are preparing for the school year. They're purchasing uniforms. They may have already purchased their uniforms at this point in time. So to arbitrarily say, look, this is going to take effect immediately, and we're going to make this happen and work, we have to restructure busing routes. We have to restructure class schedules and possibly allocation of personnel as well. So again, this is another process that we've got a recommendation that we can build off of and continue throughout the school year with the 4AB, with the analysis of the elementary Chamorro language with the reassignment of attendance areas. These are all things that are going to take time. They're very sensitive because folks are accustomed to, or as it's commonly referred to, as it's tradition for our kids to go to this school or that school or the other school. But we also know that we can't rest on that alone because it compromises a lot of operations at the school site, including student safety. And the decision at the end of the day has to be student-centered. It has to be on what's in the best interest of the students. And if being in a school that's overpopulated without enough desks is in the best interest of the students, I don't know that you'd hear very many educators that would agree with that. We know most of the space available is in the southern schools. And we've seen that with the census data that's come out, the shifting from the south to the central and to the north. The central and the northern schools are pretty full. And we know we have some space down at Southern High School. Now, how do we fill that up? Who do we send there? Who do we reassign to that area so that we make these other schools less populated? Those are tough decisions. Those are going to be very sensitive issues. There was an attempt that was made before to reassign some students from one of the high schools that's overpopulated, and it didn't go over very well, if I recall. It was a huge outcry, and, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're putting our kids in schools that are as safe as we can make them, and regulating or limiting the number of people who are on campus helps make it safer. The elementary schools felt they were fine. The high schools and the middle schools were the ones who were the most concerned with their populations.
Thank you. And so throughout the year, then we'll be having more conversations on this, and that whole picture. Right. Thank you. There was some conversation about our facilities and maintenance again, and about maybe taking parts of it and sending it over to DPW. I offer that early in this term, the Guam Legislature passed a Public Law 31-29 that offers a mechanism for you to develop a public-private partnership with people who are experts in facilities and maintenance, where thereby it would keep under your authority, but you can have experts come in. And I hope that is something that you really do look into. I know that what got passed requires a $6 million budget item for you to come back to show us how you're going to be, where you found the money and how you're going to be using it. But right now we are already budgeting 6.8 in facilities and maintenance. And so, it's just, I really feel for the people in this unit who are, to me, running, on like a hamster treadmill. They're just working. They're putting their hands into their pockets, and there's no more to be found. And so, it's this time of the year over and over again where I feel, because they work so hard, and yet, the Team Up for Cleanup, which I think is a great initiative, we shouldn't have to depend on that to ensure that our schools are up and running and ready for August 20th, right? So as you look at that, Mr. Superintendent, I hope you consider that. That really might be a mechanism that could help. It's controversial, but the people in the units are open to it. They won't be released, but they will be given the kind of support that they really do need. And that is the training, and that is the actual equipment and supplies. And so that whole model was taken after our GPA model that I think is helping our island. Although I had 2 power outages in the last month, but I think overall it's helping. You had mentioned briefly a reorganization picture. I really look forward to seeing what you might be thinking about. We've repeatedly spoken about what might be best to work with our 40 schools. I think our current model is a huge challenge to those who have stepped up to help, and so I do look forward to regionalizing somehow, but you and I have had a brief conversation on that, so I look forward to that. I just wonder why we're spending $4 million on this whole third party. I mean, I know how we got there, but I don't understand why we're spending $4 million a year on that, Mr. Superintendent. Maybe very briefly you can help me understand. That just seems to me like a lot of money.
I agree, they're very expensive. Alvarez and Marsal, I've known their work across the country, and they're very expensive. They've got a good reputation for going in and basically taking over an operation. So they've been in situations where they've run different components of a school system, and I'm also aware of their varied successes and whatnot. So, I'm still kind of I've actually been relying on Tolling to really kind of press them on their activities. But I did have a conversation last week about recognizing that they are here and they are here at the behest of the U.S. Department of Education, that I would be pressing them to align their activities and what we're paying them with my priorities, which was really focused on, once we get past this financial management system implementation, to focus it on capacity and look very hard to make sure all the dollars are going where we want them to go. I think they recognize that. I think they know that there are activities that they are performing which probably they don't need to be performing. So the question is, making sure that we are taking on those costs locally and fulfilling those positions, and if we're going to pay them top dollar, they better be in the areas where they can add the most value. And I don't know if you have any other specific issues.
One of the things, the strategies that they'll be looking at over the next year is to do more hiring locally. So instead of bringing, people from the mainland, they're going to try to pick up local personnel, people that will be here after they leave. And so that I know they've hired a couple of UOG students that they'll be working to train, and I'm hoping that they will continue to do that so they can replace people from the mainland with people that will they'll be able to train and eventually pass on their knowledge and stay on Guam.
Did they help us with all our ARA procurement stuff? Was that not their role, or was that a part of their role?
They work with us very closely on procurement in general. We take a look at ARA as well as all of the consolidated and special ed and the USDOE grants.
So even with their expertise, we still seem to have a hiccup as far as getting everything done in a timely manner.
The current procurement procedures are time consuming, and I will just say that in this last audit we had no procurement findings, and in all of the appeals, the current appeals before the OPA, they've been found in our favor. So yes, the price for that is the timeliness, right? So we're more careful, we document things better, and the price for following the rules and being careful is you balance that against the time that it takes to get a procurement through.
And I know Speaker Ben had mentioned that we have an ARA roundtable this
Yes.
week, but I do know, and I was going to applaud you for your clean audit. I was reading what the OPA, which says to me then, if we can do this, we don't need them. So that's $4 million, right? That you can reshift somehow, and that's why I just don't understand why we need to continue. If we're already doing clean audits and Tolling, you're doing a good job, and you found some people who want to be a part of the whole operations. I just think again, we just too much intervention sometimes, I think. And then afterwards, Tolling, maybe I can come up to you. You can show me exactly where in the supplemental that overtime, the past due obligations are, because again, as we all know, at least for one person, every year it's a 6% interest increase when he doesn't get his money. So I'll just chat with you a little bit afterwards. Thank you very much, Speaker Ben.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Ada?
Thank you, Speaker Ben. Mr. Superintendent, I was looking at the utilities, and of the total amount that you're requesting for on the budgeted item here, you got $14 million for power. What's being done to, conserve energy in the schools as you go around, going to the schools? Are you talking to them about power conservation?
My conversations haven't advanced that far yet, but I am aware. I did see some earlier estimates of what the utilities costs were for the school system and for individual schools. And I know a couple of our schools are proceeding to get energy audits done to really capture, get a better picture about ways they could save.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't been deeply immersed in that conversation yet, but obviously it's a high cost that we need to get a handle on. I don't know if Tolling, you've been involved with more.
One of the things that's happening is the air conditioning units that we are purchasing are being purchased with energy efficiency in mind. And one of the other ARA projects that's on the boards includes doors and windows so that we can seal the classroom, so we're not, air conditioning the entire village.
Right.
And the roofing is going to be insulated, so that should also help. As Mr. Fernandez mentioned earlier, the Army Corps of Engineer will be coming in to do an assessment at the latter part of the year, and one of the things they'll be doing is doing energy audits and looking for low-hanging fruit, things that we can implement quickly to help us address some immediate conservation measures.
So that's what's being done as we replace old air conditioning units. When we purchase new ones, we're going with the high energy efficiency.
Yes, sir.
I see. Okay. And then also on your contractual services, have we looked at ways to cut costs, like on copier services or on trash pickups and things like that? Because I know you have a 5.8 million for for those type of services. Is anything being done to look at that again and see where we'll be able to?
Yeah, I don't.
So with regard to our copier contract, we actually just had Xerox in my office last week, and we're taking a look at how we can better track the print jobs across the district so that we can work with our principals to get a better handle on that. Certainly we continue to look at all of our contracts as they to try to manage them so that they can we can use them as efficiently as possible.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Ada. Senator Duenas?
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. Talling, I went over really quickly, and so I just ask you for a detail on your analysis on the DOE receivables from DOA. So then with the 15% reserve, are you saying then that it would take the entire 15% reserve to complete this fiscal year at your appropriation level and to pay basically all of your obligation as you see it for the balance of the fiscal year?
At the current spend rate, it looks like we're going to get pretty close to the 15%.
Okay, so that would, and then at that level, what would you estimate closing the books at?
I'm not sure.
Versus your appropriation level? You're authorized.
Senator Pangilinan did speak about the increments that are frozen.
Okay.
However, we also saw an increase in the utility rates that we're spending this year. I think mostly looking at JFK. So we're thinking that the savings that we're going to make on salaries may be offset by the increase in utilities. So, my sense is that we'll get pretty close to our appropriation level.
Okay. And so I just end with just one comment, Superintendent Fernandez. I'm not sure if you've gone over this part yet with Talling and the rest of the team. It's pretty traditional, and we understand this in other meetings that we have, sometimes within the Speaker's office and other meetings prior to coming to budget meetings, that this exercise of the budget request is really reflective of if you did absolutely everything associated with your mandates, with particularly the 14 points and other considerations. However, it's consistently a fiscal reality that with the overall appropriation levels of the government of Guam as the budget moves forward, it just is very, very difficult. So I would just leave with you with this, that in doing that analysis over the years, I listened to your presentation and your opening with the conservative 4% increase of the request of the board last year. I would just ask you to balance that with what ended up being the final number authorized by this legislature, signed by the governor, and then now spending at those levels. I mean, I appreciate your situation, and I appreciate Tolling's representation, that you are on a bare bones train to end at just about your appropriation level. So I would just ask, in fairness, perhaps the 4% above that might be a number that you're faced with at the end of the day. And I just say that in all fairness because you haven't started the school year yet. And so there's a lot of time to work with your folks, work with your principals and everything else and say, if everybody else is stepping up to the plate and doing their part, we're going to have to do our part too, although certainly education is the priority. However, I just wanted you to understand that exercise because that's been a tradition for many fiscal years now. So I just wanted to leave you with that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Dueñas. Senator Mabini?
Thank you. This kind of dovetails a lot of the comments that were made by my colleagues up here. Now, we recognize that there's going to be a lot of curricular changes because of Common Core or whatnot. We also recognize, at least I recognize, that that our goal should not be just graduating our students, but we prepare them so that they're ready to enter college or the workforce immediately. Now, of course, that would require our teachers to receive a degree of professional development, and I've had a lot of conversations with Mr. Joe Sanchez, who's been phenomenal in keeping me updated on what are some of the goals and activities that are occurring in DOE to prepare them. We know that GCC has secondary faculty that are operating within DOE, and they operate academies or whatnot. They work together with your Guam DOE teachers. They partner with them so that we can prepare students to go into various fields. My question is, what and how are you, Mr. Superintendent, working on with the college regarding maybe the professional development needs of the teachers when it comes to the changes in the curricular structure? We know that Common Core, a lot of what's embedded in it is the need to prepare our students to be globally competitive. And that means to be ready to enter, again, college, or various technological careers. So, again, that I go back to the professional development needs of our teachers. Where are we there? Are we depending a lot, of course, in federal funding? Are we working and partnering with DOG and GCC? Because that is a big concern of mine. If we are going to make these big changes, our teachers need the support, and where are they getting it, and is it reflected in the budget?
So let me just speak just based on principle. I think you're right. Like I said, we're looking at the end goal, and the end goal is to enable our kids to go to start their careers or to enter into GCC or UOG or any other university that they have an opportunity to get into. And so I think it's important that we understand what the requirements are on that tail end, and that's a conversation that I hope to start. I've had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Okada and Dr. Underwood. I need to have more of that dialogue happen so I can get a better sense of how our kids are doing. And also with want to talk to the new education school dean at UOG, Frank Elon, and about his plans when he gets started, I guess in August. So just so you know, I'm saying this because I haven't been involved in the detailed conversations, but just to let you know that alignment beyond high school. I mean, it's important to me that we are aligned from kindergarten through 12th grade, so that we are handing off kids from elementary to middle school prepared for the next level into high school, but it doesn't just end there in 12th grade, that if they're coming out and they're still not able to translate what they're learning into the next step for them, then we're still falling short. And so I know Dr. Underwood mentioned there was a tripartite commission that also exists where we can have these ongoing conversations, and I look forward to that. I know Joe has also been working as well on this issue on our teachers and our career and technical education planning, so I don't know if he wants to add anything further.
Okay, thank you. I know there's kind of a lot of thoughts kind of lumped in there. I think overall, like the superintendent mentioned earlier, that we kind of want to move away from naming things Common Core and career and technical ed, because I think in the eyes of teachers and administrators and even the community, they start thinking that there's all these separate different initiatives, right, and they all kind of operate in silos. And even with our CT efforts, we want to make sure that we break down those silos between academic content and career content. So moving towards a general department understanding of preparing all students for college and careers, I think one of the first things we are doing now, and we need to continue doing, is really assessing what type of professional development needs we have with regards to our teachers. I'll give you an example of how specific we need to start getting. With regards to the transition, I'm going to use the word transition to the Common Core state standards. For some of our teachers, the unfortunate thing is that's not even a transition. For some of our teachers, that's kind of like a starting point. And part of that has to do with, over the past couple of years, with the implementation of our reform programs, the unfortunate byproduct of that is a lot of our teachers and administrators didn't have an explicit need to open our standards. Now, I know first our community with, what are you crazy? These are content standards and performance indicators for our department. How is it possible that a teacher not have to open them up? Well, in the implementation of some of our programs, if you're going to follow a script or if you're going to follow a book, and a teacher is focused on implementing the program, there really isn't an actual step for them to actually have to open the standards and make it an explicit component. So regardless of how we've approached that in the past, I think from this point on, moving forward, we just need to acknowledge that that happened. And we just need to acknowledge that for a lot of our elementary teachers, the standards that we're transitioning to are probably the first set of standards that they've seen. I mean, I've done the Common Core presentation in about maybe half of the schools personally. And afterwards, I'll always stay back for about 30-something minutes. And at first, for the first couple of schools, I was surprised to hear, I'm not used to our standards either. How much of a difference is it? And at first I was surprised, but then after like the 10th school, I realized, this is more common than we actually understood from the beginning. So a lot of these transitions for our teachers is not really a transition at all. I'm glad that Senator Yamashita pointed out that we actually had standards, at least since 1999 when the board adopted our first set of official Guam content standards and performance indicators. But again, I don't think we did a really good job back then of rolling it out properly to the point where teachers understood what the standards were and made sure that it was infused into the classrooms. And during the point where we implemented the reform programs, again, it wasn't really explicit as to what the relationship was between those standards and our reform programs. And Senator, would you mind if I kind of commented on something that Senator Yamashita spoke about earlier with regards to federal programs? Within the year that I've been in this position, those questions always came up, and those were questions that I always had as a teacher and administrator. And we've recently come back, I think it was last month or 2 months ago, that we had a meeting with US DOE, and I had a list of these questions. And one of my first questions was, well, to what extent are we supposed to implement these programs this way? And the director at the time, or the director of rural programs from US DOE, reminded us and said, we don't hold you to anything you don't put in your own grant. If you write it in your grant and you say you're going to do this, we are going to hold you to that, and that's how you're going to use those funds. So if there's something there that you don't want to implement or something that you don't want to do, then don't write it in your grant, which kind of is a funny thing, but it's an aha moment for us. The second thing is that I asked about, well, what about consultants?
I think that's why we're on high risk.
Yeah. Well, our consultants say certain things and whatnot. She said, well, you need to be reminded that your consultants work for you, and they're there to support you in your efforts to implement the program. They do not dictate district policy. So what we've done this grant cycle around is we've written the programs in a way that they are flexible enough where if we wanted to stay status quo, we could. But at the same time, we're able to have those discussions about the schedule and making sure that we get the art and the music and all of those other programs that we feel locally are important to our students. So we're not restricted as to how the grant funding is written. So those are some of the changes that we're taking a look at.
So are we saying that the budget to assist our teachers in some of these this transition is not necessarily reflected here? It's reflected in the federal budget side? I
think most of our professional development work is done through our federal funding. And I'm gonna be very careful how I say this, because I think a lot of times there's a lot of things we can do in the department that does not cost money. I really believe that, because even if you gave us $250 something million, it won't guarantee that our students are going to get the best possible education. There's a lot of internal structural changes that we need to be made, and part of that has to do with how we conduct our professional development. Professional learning communities, for example, that promote collaboration within a school and at vertical levels and among schools and within administrators, that's something that doesn't cost money. That's something that we can just do that has not been systemically implemented. So professional learning communities is actually the foundation of our professional development makeup that doesn't cost additional funds. But all the other funding needs right now are going to be paid for through supplemental federal funds.
Okay.
And just let me add two things. One is when I did start, I guess 3 weeks ago, and was brought into the conversation about our consolidated grants. It was one of my first questions was, are they aligned with where we're trying to go? Which is the first thing. Are they, and I look at Common Core just because it's really starting to form up as a driving a part of our agenda. So are they aligned? And I was assured that there was more effort to do that. And then whenever we had issues with particular programs that were brought to my attention, I said, I want to make sure that we're not just, I don't need just the federal compliance folks to be at this table. I want to hear from the programmatic folks and from Joe especially and from Rob where it mattered under his purview. I want to make sure that I understand the programs and what we're doing to serve our children. And then let's talk about, are they federally compliant programs? And not have the federal compliance piece leading our discussions. I think the second thing Joe mentioned, which is very exciting, is that it is about teacher ownership. So when you talk to me about professional learning communities, and then I say, well, what is that? And they go, well, teachers collaborate. Well, I say, okay, well, let's focus on the teacher collaboration because that's something we can all understand, and we want to happen in many different ways across our educational community. But if this is one way to structure it and make it a part of the agenda, let's do that. But let's remember that what we're really talking about is educators working together and having an opportunity to do that in a way that drives student achievement.
Okay. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear the organizational system is something that's in the forefront of your minds, and hopefully performance evaluation too, as far as how our teachers are doing, tied it to student performance. So I look forward to seeing more of that, and your reporting to the legislature. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Tyler? I got a couple of questions. The school lunch program, one of the areas that we thought we were going to improve on with the new contract was participation rate, and that we were going to be able to supplement the funding, whatever shortfall that may have occurred in the past that we've had to supplement with local funds, with the additional revenue collected by the participation rate. Where are we at on that? Because I'm hearing that there's a shortfall instead, and that we're covering the contract over and above the federal reimbursement and the collections.
No, we do have so it is something that's come to my attention. We've been working with our vendor, especially as we look at the contract, to focus on those participation numbers. And I know that, and again, I don't have the history of our performance, but I do know that they're falling far short from where we want to be with regard to food service, meaning I think we have good participation in our elementary schools, and I think it's when we get to our middle schools and high schools where we're just far short of where we need to be. So I think if we look at it in terms of what we need from our food services vendor, I care about quality and participation, and sometimes participation helps kind of speak to quality because you look at foot traffic and see where who's eating. And if we're serving less kids, we're not serving enough kids, then we need to really kind of look at the details of that particular contract. There is over the past year, we have been looking at strategies to increase participation, part of it through a point-of-sale system in our schools that will make the processes easier and maybe allow more kids to participate. But that hasn't been fully implemented yet, and hopefully in the coming year we can see that being implemented.
So are we continuing to subsidize, Stalin?
Yes.
Over and above what we thought and budgeted?
I believe the cost of the lunch that we're being charged by the vendor is more than we would get in a reimbursement rate. One of the things that we are doing is we're looking at putting together a study of, I know that your staff had done some of the groundwork to help with that, so that we can go back to USDA and try to get our reimbursement rates above, closer aligned to that of either Alaska or Hawaii. Right now, our reimbursement rates are tied to the contiguous states, and of course we have much higher costs. So that's something that we met with the regional administrator, Mr. Ng, a week or so ago, and we hope to get that report in his hands in the very near future.
I still didn't hear a number. I was asking for a number.
Okay. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get it to you, sir.
All right. The other thing is, in your summary that was submitted, there was one, and this is under all funds, there was a column under the overall budget summary. There was a column that said $14 million for under total operations, and the column fell under other fund 1, but I don't see what is that other fund, because you have the federal funds, and then you have, the general fund. What is that other fund?
I think we were just trying to distinguish between what's coming out of the general fund and what is coming out of special funds, like the passport fund or the Healthy Future Fund.
Okay.
Right.
So that's a conglomerate of
Right.
of
those special funds.
of the special funds.
Right.
Okay. Can we just specify those special funds?
Sure.
Okay. Make sure you give us that number. The other thing is, I looked at again your FTE total. Your authorized FTE total for this fiscal year is at 2987, and then you're asking for an authorized FTE level of 3,468, which is an additional 481 FTEs. Now, if I just take the difference in your personnel costs and divide that by your FTE, your new FTE would average $66,264. That seems a little high, wouldn't you say?
We'd have to go back and look at that. A breakdown of the positions that are requested under new is on page 10. So I don't think we have any,
Yeah.
right. So we'll go back and take a closer look at those dollars.
Yeah. Well, if you look at this and this. Okay. So, yeah, can we,
Yeah.
maybe we can just take a look at that. That seems like just a little bit above, especially because it's an average. You also anticipate your capital outlay. I know we didn't get this. I think the Speaker's office received this. Our office didn't get it. So we couldn't delve into the capital outlay and what those are. So we had some questions on that, but we'll have to look at this before we specify more of our questions. The other thing I wanted to take a look at was your power and water seems to your power would only increase by I guess about 700, maybe about 700,000. Are you comfortable
No.
with that?
No, and I think somewhere in the narrative, we
Mhm.
actually say that we believe we might have under-projected our,
A little bit, right?
right.
Yeah. Okay. So have you resolved the JFK issue in terms of power? I mean, it just tripled in cost almost.
You know, we continue to work with the contractor to take a look at, air conditioning specifically to try to control the, have them turn off and make sure that the temperatures are at certain levels. And, we continue to work with them. I need to take a look at the more recent power bills to see if that had any effect.
Yeah, the other thing with those air conditioning units, from what I've heard from some of the students as well as the teachers, is that not only is it too cold, but the decibel noise level, it's almost like, you know, it's really noisy, and it's noticeable to the students and distracting to the students as well as some of the teachers. So, you know, I know they put those units in there. They're kind of inside. They're not the package units in terms of the split units where you have the condenser outside, but the blowers and such on the inside unit, it really is hard to hear once they decide to kick on, and the students and the teachers are having some difficulty there. So I don't know how that can be resolved other than changing out the units. But I mean, not only is it costing us money, but
It
Yeah.
might be affecting.
yeah, it might be affecting the students' concentration. Your capital outlay is that in your contractual service or in your equipment?
Capital outlays, some of that has to do with canopies for some of our schools. I believe our maintenance division has asked for improvements made to their building. And then there might be some miscellaneous.
So they're
equipment.
intermixed. They're not necessarily in the equipment line item category. So that's something I'll have to take a look at. In your special and miscellaneous funds, and that's where the $14 million number is. But your contractual services goes from 93,000 to 10 million. Electricians?
No,
Food-
she's
food and
the food and
nutrition.
nutrition.
Oh, that's the food and nutrition.
right.
Okay, all right, okay, I see that. Okay. I don't have any additional questions, and part of that is we didn't get the details on this. We'll go through the details once again, and we'll communicate should we have any other additional questions. Does any other member of the panel have any additional questions? Oh, Senator Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the panel. I just want to go back really quick to the, you touched on the school lunch program, and I do have students a couple of kids now in the public school system, and you know, we see an increase in the cost for the school lunch program. So I'm just wondering, wasn't that increase to defray the cost for the contract that you have with the food service provider?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
When the plan was implemented to increase the cost for the school lunch, wasn't that to defray the cost or to cover the cost of the
Are you
contract?
talking about the increase that the students pay?
Yes.
Right. So as I understand, a couple of years ago, the board approved an increase in our school lunch prices based on, I think partially based on Evergreen's recommendations, and that was to catch up. I think we had, the price of the school lunch compared to the actual cost was, the price that we were charging was below the actual cost. So the idea was to try to increase the school lunch prices gradually so they could catch up with the actual cost of the price of the school lunch. So I believe there's a couple more price increases
That's right.
that are in the works, but the price of the school lunch is gradually moving closer to the cost of the meal.
Okay. So currently, it's about $250. I think the next increment the increase will go into effect at the beginning of the next school year.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is there anyone who's doing an assessment to see what the kids are eating and if the food is good?
Those are usually the subject of my conversations with the high school students. So they often complain about schools, and so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But when we did sit down with our food vendor, I've asked them, to whether and how they are measuring that customer satisfaction, meaning the kids and who are eating. They say they can do something about that, but it's probably once or twice a year, and that mostly what they do is track what food items are actually generating a lot more foot traffic, I guess is what they would say. So that's something that's data that we should be looking at along the way ourselves. So, you know, yes, we want to focus on quality, but I think the participation issue is really kind of key to really understanding if at least your kids are eating the food. Now, with regard to the menus and all of that, I haven't been involved in any of those discussions, but that's something we've raised in just terms of variety. Also, we are working to increase their purchase of local produce to support our local farmers. That's something else that we're working on with the vendor at the moment.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, just giving you the feedback that I'm getting from my own kids. My elementary, well, she's going to be in middle school now. She'll be at Untalon. She'll eat the food because it's there. They're not so picky. But the high schoolers just don't eat it. They won't participate because the food's not good. They don't like it. So, you know, we give them money for lunch. Fortunately, they have some classes over at GCC, so they'll buy from the vendor over there. But the lunch that's provided at GW, they just won't touch. And so they went an entire one of my kids went 3 years at GW and never ate lunch at the school, just because, you know, it wasn't anything that was enjoyable, palatable.
And just on that note, though, I mean, I think it's very important that we hear, not just on this issue, but in general, on some of these issues, that we hear from our students and their direct experiences, because it's very informative to me. In my first visit to Simon Sanchez, one of the students said, well, so can we have water, you know, bottled water or water with our meals? And so we say, instead of milk, and we say, that doesn't sound like an outrageous, you know, request, so why don't we start to think about that? So things like that, or complain that I've eaten breakfast at the school or eaten lunch and I got the same thing, you know, French toast, I think it was, a couple times in a row. Can we have some variety? I told them I'd love to hear more from them in some way, and I'd really like to find the right vehicle, whether it's from our department or for our elected officials in general, to find a way to get some of the input from more of these kids.
Okay, and then just really quick to touch on the Common Core, it's something that I actually look forward to. I think it's going to make DOE give them a better ability to make assessments on whether the kids are progressing. From a parent's perspective, it kind of eases my concern, because as my students go from one district to another, there's always a concern, are they going to have a hard time catching up because there's a difference in the curriculum that they're getting at the school. And then as my daughter goes from elementary to middle, I'm concerned because she's going from a direct instruction school to, I think it's a Success for All school. I'm not sure, at Untalon Middle School. But there's a difference in the teaching styles and the curriculum, so I'm worried, is she going to be able to catch up? Is she going to have the same sort of testing standards? So just something that I'm going to be looking out for and concerned about as she goes into a new level.
Well, we want to make sure that we minimize any of those types of issues as kids transition, whether it's horizontally from school to school in the same grade, and then also vertically. And so one of the things that we are focused on is, as we adopt our curriculum, there will be a core curriculum, and we want to make these intervention programs more about being on the menu of items that can be used to meet the specific needs of kids, whether they're English language learners, they're falling behind, they're advanced. That's how we want to view interventions going forward as part of as advancing our core curriculum. Regarding the movement vertically from elementary to middle to high school, I've encouraged, and I think some schools are really doing it well, they're having the conversations right now. So some middle schools are talking to the elementary schools who are feeding in, and also to the high schools, and saying, okay, here are the areas where we're seeing your kids coming in, and here's where they're really strong, and here's where we need some more work. And then also at the high school, how are you doing with our middle school students? I want to make sure we encourage that type of conversation vertically between middle and elementary. And I'll say this without identifying any schools, but there are some schools that are blocked within each other, and they say, well, Mr. Superintendent, can you help us figure out why that school is not sending us kids who are ready? And I say, well, I can't do that. I mean, you're a block away. You need to have that conversation. That's what we want to see throughout the system, teachers working horizontally and vertically to serve our kids.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Senator Tyrone, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to make a comment first with Joe in terms of the grants that you're able to write in certain things. But I think the important thing that I like to always caution, of course, the department, is that in the past I know that what was written in at the time for the DI grant, and then the department or the board made a decision only in a matter of 3 months to make a switch. And I think that that is something, and I caution, of course, you in terms of, when you say changes can be made, but you got to be able to make the changes and give some lead time for the department to either, get everything in order, but more importantly, the finances, because you can't just go in and drop something, then take a new program, and then it's going to incur additional costs. The question I have for one last question, well, another comment, first of all, is that the lunch program, my understanding is that the vendor for the lunch program actually gives every day the administrators a lunch plate to sample. And now the question is that are those administrators actually then providing any kind of input, not just to food services, but to the vendor to make sure that those services then are improved, based on at least a comment from the administrator who get those free lunches?
Actually, having been there, done that, it's the principal or their designee, because sometimes we're on specific diets that we're not allowed to participate in the lunch program, so ordered by my real boss. And what we do, we actually fill out a quality control form every single day and sign off. Milk is good, food is the right temperature, meat looks to be cooked appropriately, and put our signature on there. If there's a problem, then we make sure we raise that issue on the spot right then and there.
Okay, well, that's good then. So the last then question, and I appreciate, of course, Mr. Fernandez, your statement when you're saying that the fact that you like, some competition, of course, and you really would like eventually to see magnet schools. And the previous superintendent, of course, made a decision to then designate Antlan Middle School, of course, and GW as a STEM school. Then, so my question is that because there's always this big problem about having students then redistrict to a high school that is underutilized, that the thought may be of designating that school as a magnet school, so that then students can freely volunteer now to go to that school and then fill that school up. Whatever it is, magnet, you decide.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Well, there being no further questions or comments by the panel here, we want to thank the Department of Education for its presentation. Once again, we welcome you, Mr. Fernandez, wish you the best, and offer our support as we have supported the Guam Department of Education. I do want to say that we've got two directions here. The board and GDOE, in terms of not only going up with regards to their budget requests, not their current budget, but just the budget request, it's moving up. The governor's budget request for your current expenditures moving down. The legislature last year actually reversed that position and moved it up because we gave you additional money over and above the request by the administration. But we're never going to reach your aspirations in terms of the $290 million. I mean, it's just not there. But as always, this community, really, everyone wants the best for our children and wants the best for the Department of Education. And we are going to try to achieve that with the resources that we have and prioritize those resources as we have in the past. That reflects the priorities of the community when it comes to education and our children. Not really the priority of this legislative body only, but the priority of the community. I think the community supports functioning and functional Guam Department of Education staffed by professionals in which they are given the resources to do their jobs, and it is our job to make that as close to reality as we can. So you continue to have our support, and we'll continue the dialogue as we move forward in this budget process. So I want to thank you very much for your presentation this morning. Thank the retiring superintendent, even though in an acting capacity. I think she's admirably filled in jobs, and so we look forward to continue to working with all of you. We will recess this budget hearing at this time on the matter of the FY 2013 budget request by the administration for the departments and agencies of the government of Guam. We'll reconvene the hearing at 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning where we will take up the discussion with the Bureau of Budget and Management Research as we go into a couple of days of the presentation of the request by the departments and agencies of the executive branch as represented by BBMR. And the subject matter at the 9 a.m. meeting will be on revenues. So we are hereby recessed. Once again, Dangkulan Nasitus Masit para todos. Thank you.